Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. What's up, guys? Welcome to it, the Champion Minded podcast. I'm Allistair McCaw, this week in New York City, the city that never sleeps, that is for sure. I've got a really cool What It Takes podcast lined up for you guys. It's James Cooke, who's a competitor, an Olympian in modern pentathlon. And I'm sure a lot of you who watch the Olympics, it's a great time to get into other sports, to learn other sports, but I really wanted to get James onto the podcast to learn more about modern pentathlon, and obviously, it's tough enough training for one sport, never mind 5 sports. So this was a really interesting one, incredibly dedicated, disciplined, hardworking, all those champion-minded traits, and I know you guys are going to love this one. James, welcome to What It Takes on the Champion Minded podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Do you prefer Jamie or James?
I don't really know. I prefer, I think, Jamie. Only my mum calls me James, I think, when I'm in trouble. So, yeah, probably just Jamie.
That's funny because my middle name is James, and I always knew when I was in trouble, my mother would say, Allistair James, come here.
Yeah, and it's the tone of voice as well.
Yeah, and then I knew I was in big trouble. So, but James, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. It's awesome to have someone from a sport that we obviously see at the Olympics, but not too many people could explain it or describe it. And as I just mentioned before we went on the pod here, I was having dinner tonight. I'm in Germany at the moment. And we were talking about it, and the guys at the table were super interested to just find out more about modern pentathlon. So start with Jamie or James. Give us a little bit of your background and tell us a little bit about growing up and how you got into the sport.
Yeah. So shall I give the background of the sport first, because then that will
Perfect.
That will show how we got into it. So the idea behind modern pentathlon, it was an army sport initially. So Baron de Cooke came up with the idea of the complete sport, and it was about an army officer. So you're behind enemy lines. You've got a message that you need to deliver home. So you kind of like jump on a horse, escape out of the enemy camp, shoot some people, fence some people away, swim across a river, and then finally run to deliver your message. So that was where it was first conceived, and it has been army dominated in the 80s and 90s, and then it became more of a professional sport into like the 2000s and now. So I personally was a swimmer, so I've grown up being a swimmer pretty much all my life. I spent most of my time with my head underwater, swimming up and down the black line. My dad was actually in the RAF, so we traveled around a lot. Me and my brother, I've got a brother that's younger than me. We actually went to 7 different schools as we grew up. So we had a huge close bond with Mark, my brother. And then I kind of got to that age where it's a bit of a crossroads, sort of like 15, 16, where the swimming wasn't going where I'd like it to be going. Everyone's kind of hits that place where I either have to invest a large amount of time into the swimming, or more than I was. I was swimming 5-6 times a week to really make it, or what do I do? And for me, sport has been a massive part of my life. It's my brother was a professional rugby player. I guess you could call a professional athlete. So it's a massive part, and it was really one of those moments where what do I do? And I was actually on a warm weather training camp, in a swimming training camp with my coach at the time and my training group, and it was one of those weeks that broke me. So I think we did 100K in the pool in about 9 days, and that's when I remember sitting down with my coach and being like, I'm not sure where I want to be. I'm not sure what I want to do now. And it turns out that he was actually a pentathlete. So he was called Graham Brookhouse. He's a pentathlete from Seoul, where he won the bronze medal in the team event.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, you know what, when we go back, let's just mix things up. Let's just see where we can go. So we started to introduce running, and then there's a competition called like the Schools Biathlon, which is a run-swim event, which I entered and did quite well. So Graham was pleased with this, and he started to introduce the other sports. I remember fencing on poolside with 2 bamboo canes. So he was slowly showing me the ropes of fencing, and then because of Graham, basically I had a really good track into pentathlon, where we're a really small sport, but we're a really close family. And Graham was brilliant in sort of introducing me to the right coaches. I'm based in Cheltenham, my parents live in Cheltenham, and just down the road there's a college called Hartbury College, which was the National Junior Centre for pentathlon.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lucky enough to travel over there with some of the coaches, and picked up shooting, picked up fencing properly, and then the rest is a bit of a blur. We always get asked this, how do you get into it? And I started at about 16, and I'm 27 now. So the last 11 years have really been a bit of a blur.
Interesting. And if you could just give us, the listeners, and actually myself, a little bit of a rundown on what those 5 sports are and how a modern pentathlon event runs.
Yeah, so the day runs, basically we start off in the morning with a swim, and then we do a 200-meter swim. That's actually my best event. So I currently hold the Olympic record and the pentathlon world record for the swimming event. So that's where my base is, where I get the most points. It's followed by, an hour later we go into the fencing hall, and then we fence 35 other athletes. So there's 36 athletes in a final. We fence 35 of them to one hit anywhere on the body with the épée in 1 minute. So that one is, the real crunch time in pentathlon. It's heavily weighted in terms of points, and it's dominated by the Eastern Europeans in the fencing event, and the Asian countries actually are coming into it. But it's one of the British athletes' weakest event. We then move on into the riding. So this is where you meet your horse. You draw your horse out of a hat, and it will give you a number, and then the number will match up with the horse. You go and meet your horse.
Interesting.
Which again is always a fun experience, because you get 20 minutes with your horse, and 5 practice jumps before you go into a show jumping arena, where you have to jump 12 fences at about meter 20 at the Olympics. And I can tell you that first jump, the first practice jump on an unknown horse, that's always one where you're riding into the fence and you're like, please go okay. But generally it does. And then we finish off the day with it's called the combined event, the laser run. So I think it was in 2009 they merged the static shooting with the running. So it's very similar to like Nordic biathlon. Mm-hmm. So we run 800 meters, shoot 5 shots. We do that 4 times. So we end up with a total of 3.2K and 20 targets that should be shot down by the end of it.
Wow!
And, it's a Hungarian start.
So there's a little bit of the biathlon in there, where obviously you get the winter sport with the skiing, and then obviously they have to compose themselves to shoot those five targets.
Yeah. So with others, it's very similar. So you run the 800, you come into the range, you pick up your pistol, and at 10 meters you've got to shoot down 5 black targets, and you have up to 50 seconds to shoot them. And when it first came out in 2009, people might take 30, 40 seconds, mm-hmm. But nowadays the guys are shooting them down and the girls are shooting them down in 8, 9, 10 seconds for 5 targets. So we've all really progressed with that. Mm-hmm. And
is there a penalty? Is there a penalty like biathlon? You're saying now that they get all the targets, but is there a penalty? I think in biathlon you get a penalty of what? I can't remember what it was.
There's a loop, I think. Yeah,
a loop. Yeah,
there's a penalty loop. Well, in pentathlon, the penalty is you're standing in the range. Okay. And it's incredible how far 5, 6, 7 seconds looks in terms of distance. So you run into the range with one of the other athletes, you shoot, and they might leave the range maybe 5, 6, 7 seconds ahead of you. And then when you get out the range and you look up and you're like, oh wow, that's quite a distance.
They're 50,
So
50 80 yards up the road, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got all the hard work to catch them back up again.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Wow. I mean, it's just like, I mean, my sport was triathlon and duathlon. I competed in 5 world championships, and in the I mean, it was bad enough training for 2 or 3 sports, never mind 5. But you know, the transition area where obviously you changed from the bike to the run, um, you know, you had a little slip up there, or you couldn't get your shoe on, and you know, like you said, 5 seconds is the guy is or the girl is 100 meters out. I mean, or it's a bit of an exaggeration, but they're a good 40 meters, 50 meters, and to make that up is a lot of energy.
Yeah, it's massive, and it's one of the skills you have to be able to come into the range after running 800 meters relatively fast. Compose yourself, you know, get into the zone of shooting, get those 5 targets down, and get out the range as soon as you can. But you know, at the Olympics, there's a huge amount of pressure or competitions, and people are running past you. People are still on the range, so it's actually quite exhilarating. So you have to solely focus on your target. You can't affect anyone else, and that's hopefully my mindset that I apply when I do it, because it's so easy to look left or look right. Okay, he's on 3 shots, he's on 4 shots, so he's missing or he's gone. So to get caught up in that is a really negative thing, but very easy to do because they're running behind you, or you know, you can hear people breathing either side. So yeah, it's a really exciting event to finish off with.
Wow. That I mean, it sounds exciting as well. I mean, I've seen obviously a little bit of it at the Olympics, but never quite understood it. So I mean, definitely the next time I'm watching it, and hopefully watching you, I'm going to understand it a lot more, and obviously the listeners as well. But you said that the swimming was the first part, the first leg, and that's one of your strengths. I mean, you're in a lot of the races, are you the leader after the first leg, and does that give you an advantage in any way, or more of just a psychological advantage, would you say?
Yeah, I guess it gives me points difference, but actually this year the points difference for swimming has changed, so they've become less important, I guess, which is a huge blow for myself and also the British program, because the British program have such strong swimmers. Like, we recruit from a swimming background. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you know, you're at the top of the leaderboard, or first or second, depending on how the day's gone, going into the next event, which is obviously a great position to be in. But then this is when the real work starts. Like the fencing, like I said before, is massively weighted. And for me personally, it's one of my weaknesses, and I've been working incredibly hard to try and for it not to be a weakness, but it's down to that element of, because it's only one hit, there's also quite a large amount of luck that involves. There's a number of hits that you might think you've just touched the opponent, but you know, it might be a double, or they might have hit you on the way through. And the fencing is a real dogfight. It's a real dogfight. There's, you know, if you were to sit in the fencing hall, there would be guys shouting aggressively, getting the hit, or people would be disappointed with not getting the hit. So it's actually a really good atmosphere when, like in the men's or a women's final, because each hit means so much. I think if I've got my numbers right, it's 8 running seconds. So, you know, if for example, if you get 2 or 3, 4 hits in a row, you're building your running seconds up. So then you start the later events with a better handicap.
Interesting. Wow. It sounds definitely of a sport that there can be a lot of chaos going on around you, and focus is probably one of your most important aspects. So, I mean, actually, that's where I want to come in with the mindset and the mental toughness in the sport. How important is mental toughness in the sport, and what do you do yourself to work on that?
Yeah, I think mental toughness, or the mental aspect, the mindset, is something that's come into probably not fashion, but it's certainly come into the focus in the last 2-3 years, because I think people have worked out now that not being the biggest, the best, the strongest doesn't make you the winner. Like, I think there's a massive potential for people to be their worst enemy or their best friend in terms of the mindset. And it's something that I'm personally trying to work on a lot. I'm just looking down. I'm reading the book Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck, which is really good. Yeah. So like something that for me is quite a challenge, because I'm not the most confident athlete going into it. I do worry slightly in what's going on, but it's trying to focus on yourself, because ultimately you can't really compete with anyone. I think most sports you're actually competing against yourself. Yes, you might be in a team sport, or you might be an individual tennis player or stuff like that. But if you can be the best person you can be on that day, I think that. You can't really fail. Yeah, you might lose the point or the game or the football match or the rugby match. But for me, and this goes into my coaching thing, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, like, we're trying to create people that are the best versions of themselves, or that we're trying to create the athlete that's the best version of themselves. So they're continually learning, they're continually looking for the next thing to make them better. But yes, for the mindset, especially in pentathlon, in the swimming, you're competing against yourself. Yeah, you're in a race with 7, 8 other guys in the swimming pool at the time, but you want to be the best person you can. In the shooting, yeah, you got other people breathing left, right, running past you, the lights are flashing, but ultimately you can't affect anyone else. So you just have to keep yourself to yourself, do your process, and then get out the range as soon as possible. So that for me is one of the biggest challenges, because I like to kind of like look around. I get distracted probably too easily. But it's something that I'm personally working on with our psychologist that's based up at the training center.
Interesting, because that's funny. Actually, this morning I tweeted out, "You are the competition." It's about, each day it's not about outdoing your opponents. It's about outdoing yourself, because at the end of the day, you are the competition. Just like you mentioned there, you really are. Even if you're competing, competition is competing against someone else or other people. But at the end of the day, you are competing against yourself. But something that comes across to me, and obviously I've worked with a lot of athletes, and obviously at Olympic level and so on. But something that comes across to me, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, James, but you seem like a very tough guy on yourself. I mean, you're a guy that, and I could be wrong, but goes home and just is like tough on yourself and critical, and this could have been better and that could be better. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that is nail on the head. It's and I think it's a trait that quite a lot of athletes have. Mm-hmm. Like we really want to be the best. Like our whole lives are pretty much are laid out for us. We have training plans. We ultimately have goals at the end of the year that depend on how we do. So we all want to to continually improve. That's like the whole mantra of training, I guess. So yeah, I do critique myself probably the hardest out of all, like out of coaches, out of performance directors, stuff like that, because I ultimately want to achieve my goals. Yeah, basically, I qualified for London. So in 2012, it was our home Olympics. I qualified for that, but ultimately didn't get selected, which was massive for me. I was a young athlete at the time. Didn't get selected. I can actually remember getting the selection email at the M4 service station just as I was driving back to Bath, and obviously being devastated by that. And then I spent the next 4 years building and trying to become the best athlete I can be. Going into Rio, I was world number 1, and I'd won back-to-back World Cup and World Cup final going into Rio. Mm-hmm. So I was probably in the best shape I've ever been. I was riding a massive wave of confidence from the previous competitions going in, and then I absolutely bombed it in the fencing. I still to this day can't remember being in the fencing hall. I can't remember what happened in the fencing hall. I can't remember, talking to anyone in the fencing hall. So that was a huge disappointment for me. So now I've only actually got 2 more years until Tokyo. But it's just, like I say, continuous improvement, looking for the elements to try and put the jigsaw together, and then hopefully perform on the world stage.
Mm. Now, you spoke about there obviously disappointment and setbacks. How have you best learned from setbacks, and is there any advice you could give out to athletes or anyone that's listening out there on how to best get over disappointment?
I think it goes back to like the cliche stuff. You see it on Instagram and Twitter, and you've heard like the famous quotes where what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, for me, like, life goes on. When you have a huge disappointment, be it in sport, be it in selections, be it in exams, stuff like that. At that moment in time, it seems massive, and it seems like you failed. And trust me, I've been there. So having to ring your parents when you're at the M4 service station saying I didn't qualify, I'm not going to the Olympics, was huge. But having the support around you, and ultimately knowing that, and the world will keep on turning, because then you can get back into it. You can get back onto the grind and work harder than you have before. So everything's a lesson. Like in fencing, if you lose, I always try and say to myself, it's not losing if you learn. You have to continuously keep learning. So yeah, the cliche, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think having a great support team around me, like having the family, coaches, friends, that understand what you're trying to do, that understand that you might have, I guess, the word sacrifice. You've put life on hold to be a professional athlete, to chase the dream of like this Olympic medal. But ultimately, the world will keep on turning. So it's not the end of the world. As long as you've been the best you can be, and as long as you've worked as hard as you can, I think you can hold your head high, whatever.
I like that, and that's great advice, especially. I was with an athlete today who's obviously having a bit of a tough time and a few defeats back to back, and we just discussed the exact same thing: is learning from the losses, and you've never lost if you've learned, and obviously using it to inspire you and motivate you to work harder and figure it out, because sports is not just a straight line of progression, as you know, and what you've said. I mean, obviously, knocking on the door of Olympic selection and not getting chosen, I mean, I can just imagine how heartbreaking that is. But that segues nicely into the fact that you did qualify for the 2016 Rio Olympics. Tell us a little bit about that experience. How was that for you?
Yeah, it's an amazing experience, and I think to be honest with you, it was a massive relief. So after 4 years, after the London disappointment, I had 4 years of holding my breath almost, because I didn't want to not waste another 4 years, but I didn't want to fail again and go back to those demons, because again there's a large amount of pressure. Friends and family don't mean to put pressure on you, but it kind of, you have that pressure that you want to make them proud, you want to do the best you can. So then when I eventually did qualify for Rio, it was like, phew, that was the first relief, that was the first feeling, sorry. And then it was just one of the best experiences of my life. It's really hard to explain. The Olympic bubble was incredible. The Olympic Village, the whole training beforehand. I think actually the best thing I can say is it's like a club that you're part of, and occasionally you walk around town, or you're out for a stroll or whatever, and you see someone wear a Team GB t-shirt that they've obviously bought, as a replica of, and you kind of see that and you're like, that's my team. So I can imagine it's probably what a football player or a rugby player feels like when they see a supporter in their t-shirt with their name on the back. It's not quite like that, but when you see that, it's you're part of a really special family. And being out there, it was amazing. You're walking around it's called the Olympic Village, but it should be called the Olympic City. It's massive, and there's famous superstar athletes walking around. Normally, going to the lunch hall, which is massive. Going to, I don't know, get some food at the outdoor food areas. People are obviously on massive success. They might have won medals and they're coming home happy. And then it's also, on the other hand, you've got people that are really disappointed. So it's like this high octane fueled city that only exists every 4 years. So it's an amazing experience.
And it's obviously easy to tell the athletes that have finished their event, right?
Yeah, you can. So like obviously the swimmers are fantastic because they have the first week.
That's right.
Where they're obviously competing, and you might even be on the first day if you have an event on the first day, and then you have 10 days afterwards or more to enjoy the fruits of the Olympic Village. And they really do. But unfortunately, pentathlon is on the last day.
Oh no, really?
So
okay.
we've got our heads switched on until the last day. So we actually flew into the Olympic Village, or travelled into the Olympic Village, I think on just halfway through the second week, because we were actually up in Belo Horizon, which is where the Team GB holding camp were, and they were fantastic. Like the support staff, that the BOA supply and put on, are brilliant. They are absolutely brilliant. You couldn't do it without them, really. And they like I said, they are so good at looking after you.
Wow, it must have been amazing fun. And what I could hear just in our conversation, Tokyo is definitely on the plans.
Yeah, it's something that probably occupies your thoughts, not as much as you think, but then occasionally it kind of hits home that okay, it's only in 2 years' time now, or 2.5 years' time. So we're actually training hard. We've got our Europeans in 3 weeks, and next year's Europeans are a big Olympic qualifier. And they're actually held in our home city of Bath, where we train. So that I was actually talking to our CEO today about the Europeans that are coming there, and it's come around so quickly because Rio only feels a year or 2 years ago, but actually we're already starting to plan the new Olympic cycle where we're trying to qualify, ready to go.
And also just from a physiological point of view and psychological point of view, you're getting to you'll be 29. Do I get that right in Tokyo? Which is really a great age athletically. Well, I mean, I suppose you could go on in your sport with regards to keeping yourself in great shape for another Olympics after that, or who knows how many more. I mean, we look at Steve Redgrave, who competed in 5, 6?
5 Olympics. Yeah. Well, I think my parents would kill me. I think my dad would definitely kill me if I went for another one. But it's actually quite a good age for pentathlon because the slightly more mature athletes have a huge experience bank in terms of the fencing, the riding, and the shooting, and their physical events are dropping off slightly, but not to the end of the world. And then the younger guys coming through have obviously slightly younger, can bounce back from injuries, blah blah blah. So they're actually quite good at the physical events, but then they lack the experience in the fencing and the riding and the shooting. So it's actually a really good balance. And I think the average age is, don't quote me on this, I think it's about 29 for Olympic medalists in pentathlon. So coming up to probably the perfect age.
Yeah, there you go. Just before we got on the podcast here, we were talking about that you have your favorite particular countries or cities where you competed, and what was fascinating, I was talking to a tennis player 2 weeks ago, and I asked him how things are going, and he says, well, in all honesty, a little bit nervous. I've got a big tournament coming up next week in the Netherlands, and I've got a lot of points to defend. And in tennis, how it works is that um, uh, this week, your previous week, or should I say, this week. Um, falls away from the last year, if you get what I mean. So your points
Yeah.
that you earned this week fall away the following year. So, he's obviously concerned that he's going to be losing a lot of points this week. He's going to drop down the rankings, which means, getting into other events, so there's like implications there. And I said to him, there's two ways to look at that. There's one way of right now, what you're telling me, fear, defending points, and here's the thing: you're never defending a title. You're going for a title. You're never defending a title, in my opinion. And then I said the other way you can look at that is I love it. I can't wait to get back to that place where I feel my best. I competed my best, um, and I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna go for it again. There's two ways to look at that. And you were saying that you had two particular events that you enjoy. I think one was in Hungary, you said, and then you said one was in Sarasota, Florida, where I lived for a few years, and it's a beautiful part of the world. So. Um, tell us about that. That feeling, or is it a superstition, or what is it that makes you love to go back to where you competed well?
Yeah, I think it's to be honest with you, it's like the home comforts. So you always obviously have great memories with great experiences. So I think the first time I won in Sarasota and also in Hungary, they resonate with me. They're great memories to have. And then when you go back there, you kind of, you feel slightly more confident. You recognize the venues. You might recognize some of the volunteers that were there last time. So like the familiarity, I personally think helps me. You also know your way around the venue. Like I say, you've been there before. So for me, that's sort of a positive. I like to have that familiar feeling. And I think you're completely right. I love the quote you said there, that you're never defending a title, you're always going for a title. Because that's what it is. I think if you have should we call it a defensive mindset, that you're always on the back foot. I think if you're obviously going out there to win, which every athlete is going out there to do, you have to be really not aggressive, but you have to be really like dominating on it. And being in an environment that you've owned before, that you've dominated on the world stage before, I think has a great little confidence boost, because you can do it. Like I said, you've been there, you've done it before, so you can. So those doubts that you might have, should be eased slightly.
Interesting. Um, getting back to coaching. Um, do you have five individual coaches for all your sports, or how does that work, or do you just have one coach?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I've got more coaches than I really know what to do with almost. So we have like specialist coaches. So we have a fantastic coaching team that support us in terms of, we've got a riding coach, a specialist riding coach. We've got specialist S&C gym coaches. We have where am I going with this? We have specialist fencing coaches, but then also overseeing that, we have what you probably call as the head coach. So he's the guy that pulls it all together, pulls the program together, balances the day, balances the blocks, that sort of stuff in the training plan. So yeah, it's quite a logistical operation, balancing the five sports. And then also on top of that, like I said, you have like the S&C, the nutritionists, the doctors, the physios. So we're all one big machine, hopefully pointing in the right direction. And then the head coach, the men's head coach, is the conductor, pulling the things together, like a big orchestra, I guess. So yeah, it's a big challenge, to be honest.
So how many sports would you practice in a day?
So yeah, busy during the day, to be honest with you. So I'll give you an example. So today is a Monday. So a typical Monday for me looks like an easy run in the morning to kind of just wake the legs up going into the week. So I probably get like a 30-minute run done. I then go straight into having a fencing lesson, and that lesson is basically running through the technique, the tactics of what we're trying to develop in the game plan. Then we jump in the pool, so probably have then a 3-4K swim set. Out of the pool, have some lunch. Then in the afternoon, I'll pick up the gun. I'll do some static shooting. I was then in the gym this afternoon, and then I had my second run of the day, which was a run and shoot. So just obviously combining those two elements together, and then we'll finish the day with a free play session. So that a fencing free play session. So that will be 90 minutes of fencing, where hopefully you put what you've learned in the lesson in the morning into practice in the evening. So yeah, today was a really busy day, and like I said earlier, it's 3 weeks until our Europeans, so we're pretty much in the peak of our training workload at the moment. So it's one of those days where you get home. So I was in the training centre this morning at 8, and then got home at about 6:30. So you're in the training centre all day, and then sit down on the sofa, and obviously the Football World Cup's on at the moment, so flick that on and just go, thank God that's over.
Correct. Oh man, that sounds like quite a. I mean, that's quite a. It is a full-time job, isn't it? And even more so.
Yeah, it like I say, it keeps you out of trouble. It keeps you busy. And that's, like I said, that's a typical day.
Wow. Now, big question. It must be a heck of an expensive sport. Any idea what a season would set back a competitor like yourself? In excess?
No, I don't really know, because we're fortunately supported by UK Sport, so we're funded via the national lottery, so that that's a fantastic opportunity for us, and we couldn't do it without the national lottery helping us and funding us. But yeah, it's an expensive sport. The fencing equipment is relatively expensive, and then we have the travel. So we travel all year round, going to competitions, training camps. I funded myself to Kenya to go out to Kenya for 3 weeks at the start of the year to work on my running. So I went up to the little village of Iten up in Kenya, which was probably one of the best. Well, I've said the Olympics was the best experience of my life, but Iten was very, very close behind it. So I took myself away from the busy bustle of Western world and lived with a training camp up in Iten with pure runners, which was brilliant. It was so good to reflect on what they do, to learn from what they do. They literally live to run, so everything is about running, which, like I said, was brilliant. It was so refreshing to go out there.
What would you say? I mean, besides obviously everything is centered around the running, what were your biggest takeaways from that experience? I mean, because that's to be honest with you, that's always something I've wanted to experience. Is obviously just the history and the culture of the Kenyan running. The runners is just something else. They're dominating marathons and have been for some time. But what were your biggest takeaways from that?
I think it's just a pure love for the sport. It's obviously, for them, it's seen as a way out of poverty. You could bump shoulders with multi-millionaires out there, really. If you bumped into Mary Katani, which we did, she's having a morning run, and you just pop past her. But you just can't tell because they're so humble, they're so friendly. It's one of those it's one of the most surreal experiences to be running in Kenya. So you get up early, because they run roughly about 6 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They're like the three main running times for the village. And the most surreal moment is when you are running in the relatively cold environment up in the mountains in the morning, and you see, it's called a Kenyan train. So it's where there'll be 10, 11, 12 guys or girls running through the morning dust, and they just are born to run. They're the most amazing looking runners as they just plod slowly past you, and then you go and bump into them at the coffee shop down the road, and they talk about running. They're watching videos on YouTube of running races, so they're looking at tactics, they're looking at times. They are born to run. Basically, it's one of the, it was, like I said, the most refreshing experience of my life to go out there, take yourself away from electronics, from the internet. There was power cuts almost every day, so you sat there, playing board games with them or talking about running, eating the food, which is very, very plain, very simple. When I came back to England, to the Western world, and I actually went out for dinner. It was my granddad's birthday, and I went out for dinner, and I felt physically sick after the food because it's so sugary or oily or sweet. And after 3 weeks of eating rice and beans and ugali, it was a bit of a shock. So I highly recommend to anyone to go out there because, like I say, it is fantastic.
I mean, tell me, at first, was it tough to disconnect from Wi-Fi and the phone and everything? Was the first, few days pretty tough, or was it pretty easy just to switch off from that?
I think over the first 2 days it is, because I think nowadays we're so attached to our phones, myself included. My girlfriend hates it. I'm always on my phone, apparently. But yeah, we're so attached to the phones, and we're so used to getting an easy answer or a quick answer.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asks you a question, you can go online, you can Google it, you can look whatever up, or you're so used to being able to get in touch with someone or contact them that it is weird. It's like you lose your right arm, for example, but then by the end of it, you don't really need the phone because you have such a friendly culture out there where they all meet up after a run, where they all sit down and they have coffee and they all talk about the day and they talk about how the run was. And so I was saying at the High Altitude Training Centre, which is Lorna Kippagat Centre,
Mm-hmm.
and there are Western runners up there and also Kenyan runners that are based there. And they just sit around and talk or sleep or just rest out in the shade, ready for the next run. And then you kind of just get swept up in that. So suddenly then you don't go on Instagram for the next 20 minutes and scroll through videos or pictures that you've seen already, or you don't need to watch TV, or it's so refreshing. I've said that word I think 3 or 4 times now, and that's the best way to describe it, because you just have the essentials that you need, and everything else is kind of just like junk around you, and you strip back to the bare necessities, really.
Yeah, just sitting in a restaurant tonight, and I was just observing. There's a junior tournament going on here at the moment, and I must have counted probably around about 30 or 35 kids, and probably I would say 30 of those were just engaged in their phone. They're sitting at the same table, but they're actually just looking at their phones. No one's talking, and I'm just, oh man, it's just that social aspect has gone out the window. People just aren't talking anymore.
Yeah, we convince ourselves that the world is, social media. Social media is everywhere, apparently. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everything like that. And like I say, I am terrible for being on my phone. But
it's so easy to become, like you said, it's so easy to become addicted to it because, there's always one more thing to see, one more result to see, one more, whatever it may be, bit of information to find. I mean, it's so addictive. What I've done in the last few months, which has really helped, is I purposely put my phone away for an hour a day, and I'll go for a walk. And it's usually at the end of the day. I'll call it the mindful walk, where I'll just detach from the phone and just be in my own thoughts. And I can't tell you how many ideas or how more creative I've become just by spending that hour a day just in my own thoughts.
Yeah, completely. I think when you take yourself out of probably the world, and you are in your own head, and you can run through the days. I was listening to Danny Cipriani's podcast earlier just to prepare for this almost, and he was saying how he writes down 3 things that he thinks he's improved on in the day or something like that, and that's brilliant, because that reflectiveness that you can look inside and see what you've improved, rather than spending it like you said on your phone or on your laptop or something like that. I think that's something that we've lost, in this day and age. But then also, I'm the biggest hypocrite, because unfortunately I'm locked to my phone. But that's potentially something that I can look at in the future. I know the English hockey women that won gold in Rio. They had a phone ban almost. They didn't use social media for an extended period of time. They looked after each other. They sort of went on this radio silence. And obviously, you can't directly link that to the success they've had, but it is something that they've all agreed to. And this for me goes on to culture almost, that the culture is the biggest buzzword at the moment. It's in the papers, it's in the news, it's everywhere, and organisations want to create this winning culture or the best culture. But for me, culture is something that is just a set of rules, guidelines, ideas that the group has come up with and the group live by. And it doesn't matter if they're medal winning culture or financial culture, because it's what they've set. It's not what other people have set for them. So I read Clive Woodward's book Winning recently, and it talks about this culture. And Clive. I have a huge amount of respect for Sir Clive. So people pick on those ideas and they present it to them. But we all forget that England could have lost the World Cup if Johnny hadn't kicked that drop goal in the last minute. And would that have been a winning culture, or would it have just fallen by the wayside? Yeah. So for me, like I say, culture, regardless if it's winning or not, it's what a group of people set and live by, and enforce themselves. And that could be their winning culture. That could be their winning ideas.
Yeah, no, good point. I mean, that's something, obviously in my line, I consult to a lot of colleges in the United States and a few sports teams on team building and culture. And, he spoke about their rules, and, something I describe rules as more of the leadership making the rules, as where standards is something that's being collectively decided between the leadership and the team members or the players, where there's more accountability involved and more of a we instead of a me factor. So yeah, for sure. I mean, cultures, and I mean, who better than Clive Woodward? I mean, personally, I've learned a lot from Clive, and he's been my secret mentor. I don't know Clive, I haven't met him, but definitely read his books and follow a lot of his principles, because he's been immensely successful in that particular area. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just want to touch on one thing. So I was speaking to my dad about this a couple of weeks ago, because I can't remember the question that he asked me, but he was talking about like accountability or it's like buying into it. So I use the analogy of, if I asked you to draw a horse now, or just draw something on a piece of paper, draw a dog, draw a horse, draw an animal, something like that, and you would do it. You would draw the horse or the animal, and you'd put your effort into it, and you'd shade it, color it. It would be personal to you. And then if I drew one and then took your picture off you and gave you my picture and said that you're using this one now, and then ripped your picture up, which picture would you want? So like, you have to ask yourself, which one would you want? So it's getting people to buy into it. So it's not enforcing, like you say, it's not enforcing a rule or enforcing a picture on someone. It's getting them to build the picture or draw the picture that they can then take forward. So like, if we just go back to my coaches, like at this level, at this age group, you're reasonably experienced, you've been doing it a long time. So for me, a coach is someone that can just kind of like be a sounding board, that they nudge you in the right direction just to keep you on track. But you have to take accountability for it. It's something that I say to a lot of like the younger athletes, that no one's going to do it for you, that you have to take accountability. You have to build something with your coach that you will buy into. Otherwise, you just won't believe it. You won't trust it. Because unless you've put the blood, sweat, and tears into the ideas, into building something, be it a training plan or a strategy for fencing, or working on the technique in a dive in a swimming pool, unless you've understood it, you've justified it to yourself, that's when you can roll on it, and that's when you can give it your 100%. Whereas if you're being led and you don't quite trust the ideas or believe the ideas, then you're never going to get 100% out of it.
Yeah. I've always, my philosophy has always been, there's got to be a buy-in, but there's got to be a believe in. And, for me to get more of a buy-in and a believe in, it has to involve, if we're working in a team environment, the players as well. Otherwise, it really does feel like it's just coming from leadership and they want you to buy in. But, the players are thinking, well, I didn't agree to that, and I wasn't part of setting up those values or those standards, whatever it may be. So, very, very, very interesting. And I love that analogy as well. So, moving on, because I don't want to take too much of your time. Of course, sleep is one of the most important factors in athletes. So I don't want to steal too much time away from you there, James.
Right.
Coaching. 3 things that you look for in a coach. I know there's a lot of things that we're looking for in a coach, but what three important things for you stand out?
So we just touched on it briefly, but for me, I think a coach is judged by their athletes, and if you can create an independent athlete and not a dependent athlete, I think that's a sign of success. I think it goes back to something I said at the very start. We're trying to create like better people almost that would be better athletes. So someone that is independent, that can think for themselves outside of the environment, that can build something themselves with communication and speaking to the coach and stuff like that, rather than an athlete that's very dependent on a coach. I've seen it quite often where like a younger athlete might be at a competition and something might just go slightly wrong, and suddenly they're looking straight to their coach to try and change it, what happened, what went wrong, I don't know what to do. Whereas I think if we're trying to create people that are independent, that can deal with the problem solving, that's unraveling in front of them, that can pull it back from 6 or 7 hits down in the fencing, or I don't know if you use a term in rugby, they've just conceded 2 tries quickly. So having athletes or players that can then take the game by the scruff of the neck, and they've been in this situation before,
Game
and
changers.
they're independent, that they can then do something. It's like going back to Clive. We've used him a couple of times. He said when he went to the Royal Marines, and they said that I'd go to war with those type of people, like those game changers that you say. So like I said, the first thing I would look for is if a coach can make me independent, rather than just dependent on his every word. I like the idea of communication. I love sitting down with my coach, and I think he likes it too. But he's Italian, so he's very very friendly, and he loves to sit down, have a coffee, and talk about his ideas, what he likes to do, what do you think about this. So in that conversation, that we're putting opinions on the table, and they're not right or wrong opinions, they're just opinions, and just discussing them through, and then hopefully we come out something that we both believe in, we both have justified to each other and justified to ourselves, and then we can move forward with that idea. And then the third thing, I'm trying to think, I don't really know, passion, to be honest. I think, I can't remember the exact quote, it's a bit cliche, but athletes don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think you could have the best knowledge in the world, or you have the best coaching techniques or stuff like that, but until the athlete really knows you care, I don't think they'll take that on board. I don't think they'll that not the icebreaker, but that ice will still be there until they've seen you really care for those athletes. I think it goes back to the first time I met Marco, my coach, and he was actually cheering on the girls. So Marco is a men's head coach in the performance team. He was actually cheering on the girls, and the boys were sat in the crowd, and we could hear this racket, this noise coming from someone, and we were like, who is making that noise? They were cheering on so loudly, and we were like looking around, and this guy was like hollering so loud. And then when we finally identified it, it was Marco, and we were like, oh my God, this guy cares. Like, this guy really cares. He's absolutely screaming for our girls, who are immensely good, by the way. Our girls, I think they've won 5 Olympic medals at the last 5 Olympics. So our girls are brilliant. And then, Marco was screaming for them. And then that was kind of the moment where it was like, this guy's really on board. Like, he really does care for us.
So a combination of care and passion there, and obviously, like you said, communication being very important as well. So, I mean, that's so important to hear, especially for coaches, because obviously this is a podcast which reaches athletes and coaches. But just the importance of sharing ideas, of rather speaking with your players instead of to your players.
Yeah. Like I said,
or
it goes
athletes.
Back to
sorry.
Even regardless, athletes, players, it goes back to just having that friendship, because then you can really take like the ideas to the next level, rather than kind of like forcing it down someone's throat almost.
And it's where trust is built, right? Is where there's a collaboration and a sharing of ideas, and what do you think, all these type of things. I mean, that's where trust is built as well in the relationship.
Yeah, massively. And you never really know how things are going to go until you test them, and you could probably call it like the heat of battle. So I always find the first competition of the year, the first World Cup of the year, is always that kind of like crunch time, because you've been working all winter with your coach, the whole team up in Bath, and it's been going great, like, or it could be going badly, but generally it's going well. And then you have to test that in the heat of battle in the first competition. So you don't really know what your rivals have been doing. You don't know how everything else has been going. So you put this trust in your coach, and he's been working with you, and then you kind of have to see how it goes. And that's when the test is. That's when you can go back to the drawing board and say, that worked really well. I like that idea that you were saying about this, and that led to that. Or, you know what, why don't we just potentially change that because it didn't quite work, or maybe I didn't put the full amount of application into it, or something like that. So it's great having a plan and having like a philosophy going forwards, but then it has to be continuously looked at and slightly altered and slightly changed. Otherwise, progress will never be made, in my opinion.
Man, James, this has been awesome, and obviously, like I said, I don't want to take too much of your time. I mean, I could chat with you another at least 2-3 hours on all these things, and I have so many more questions. So I've definitely got to get you on sometime in the future again. Maybe who knows?
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely in the build up to the next Olympics as well. So moving on to the last part of the interview. It's quick fire questions. No more than a sentence or one word. Your choice. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Favorite food?
Steak pie.
Okay, very British, isn't it?
Actually, I don't know. Cheesecake? Can I change my answer and put cheesecake down? I love cheesecake.
Especially the which type? There's quite a few. There's especially the American one.
Raspberry cheesecake.
Okay, specific.
No, raspberry cheesecake. Love it.
You're a man of details. We didn't get onto details, did we? About the importance of small details.
Yeah.
All right. Pet peeve. Any pet peeves?
I hate people eating food near your ear. My girlfriend does it to me all the time. She's kind of just sat there like eating a bowl of cereal when we're watching TV. And it's like, oh my god.
And she does it on purpose as well, I bet.
I'm pretty sure. So I've got a sneaking suspicion she's not trying anymore.
All right. Okay. So she better not listen to this, otherwise she's going to be definitely going to be doing that. So, favorite movie?
Remember the Titans, the American football film.
Okay, haven't seen that, so that could
Oh,
be
it's
one.
brilliant. Highly recommend.
All right. Favorite sport, obviously besides pentathlon.
Rugby. Yeah, rugby. Love watching my brother play. Love watching any rugby game, to be honest.
Awesome. Favorite athlete, male or female, past or present?
Probably Federer, Roger Federer in the tennis. I think he's brilliant. You know, he's greatest of all time, isn't he? He's what a champion.
Yeah, and Wimbledon coming up as well, right? So that should be good fun.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
The current book you're reading.
So yeah, I said it earlier on the podcast. It's Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Okay, so investing a lot of time on the mindset side there.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. Favorite person to follow on social media?
Oh, that's a good one. I quite like following Elliot Kipchoge on Instagram. So he's obviously one of the best marathon runners in the world.
Okay.
And after being up in Kenya, I can kind of relate to some of the runs he does now. So when he puts a picture up, I'm kind of like, oh, I've been there.
Yeah, you can almost taste it, right? You know exactly what it's all about. Yeah.
The magic dust.
There you go. The chapati.
Yeah.
Person you'd love to take to lunch.
Person I'd like to take to lunch. So I'm working with a guy called Dave Aldred at the moment. He's a fantastic pressure coach, and so I've worked with him for a couple of weeks. But I would like to take him for lunch to say thank you for working with me, first of all, but also to pick his brain more and more and more. Like the guy's full of ideas. Just want to keep picking his brain. It's like a gold mine.
There you go. Or showing some gratitude as well. And I'm sure it will happen. So, tell us something about yourself that others maybe don't know about you.
I am terrible at surfing, but I love it. So I guess that's something, I think.
Surfing. Favorite spot you've surfed?
Croyd Bay. Yeah, it's one of my favorite places to go to relax after the season or just between some competitions.
Where's that, James?
So it's North Devon.
Man, that water must be freezing, dude. I mean, I'm obviously in Florida and I hardly go in the water there, and it's like a bath. But
yeah, no, it is cold, I'll admit. So yeah, you have to get a wetsuit on.
No, thank you.
But yeah, love it.
All right, man. And last question: coffee, tea, or protein shake?
It's gonna have to probably be protein shake because I don't drink hot drinks. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink tea.
You're British. You're British, and you're not a tea drinker.
Yeah, I know.
I would have put my money on the tea one, to be honest.
No, I just don't really like hot drinks. So yeah, protein shake.
Okay, all right. The dedicated, champion-minded athlete. All right, final question. In your opinion, James, what does it take to be champion-minded?
In my opinion, it's always trying to be the better version of yourself. Day in, day out. Just keep trying to be a better person.
Love it. Simple, straight to the point. James, it's been awesome having you on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and obviously letting us into the world of modern pentathlon. I'm sure a lot of the listeners are going to understand the sport a lot more and obviously keep a track on your progression as well. Where can we follow you? What are the best social media outlets for following you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter and Instagram. So on Twitter, I think I'm Jamie Cooke _5, and on Instagram, I'm Jamie Cooke, I think _5 as well. So yeah, just follow me on there, and it'd be great if you could follow my journey, support my journey. Hopefully, going to Tokyo.
Awesome stuff, James Cooke. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.
So that's it, guys. Another show in the bag. Thanks so much for joining me, and a big thanks to James for taking the time out of his busy schedule. Remember that this podcast, Champion Minded, is on iTunes. A big thanks to all of you who've left a rating and a review. It's also on YouTube on the Champion Minded channel. Join me on social media on Twitter at Allistair McCall, Facebook McCall Method, and on Instagram Be Champion Minded. So guys, like I always say, you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Until next time, stay champion minded, my friends.